So, welcome, Roba and Emma. And thanks so much for joining us. Just a reminder, as always, we're recording the workshop for those who can't make it. So, if you don't want to be on the recording, you can turn off your cameras. So thank you so much, Ashley, for joining us today and delivering this very important workshop. Job interviews is usually where a lot of our participants kind of fall short for not understanding how to present their experiences, their skills in a job interview setting within Ireland. So it's great to have an expert like you on board here to share your tips. So yeah, I'm not going to spend too long talking. Welcome and thanks so much, Ashley. And at the end, there will be time for questions. If anyone has any questions during the chat, just feel free to use the chat function on Zoom, and we'll pick it up later. So thanks so much.
Thanks, Lisa. So just by way of introduction, I am Ashley Burke. I am the recruitment operations lead in Bank of America. So what I do currently is managing kind of core process improvements, managing training all our recruiters, and we've got a kind of variety of projects and process efficiencies. I am based in Dublin. I have been with the bank for 8 years, and I have about 15 years, awful to say that. I think about 13, 14 years of recruitment. I would rather like the 3 or 4 years. But I was a recruiter for the first probably 7 years of my career. Then I went into a recruitment manager role and worked on various different projects within the bank. I have an honours degree in business and HR. I have 2 daughters. Lisa met one when they were leaving the room a few moments ago as I'm working from home. Yeah, that's just a bit of an overview about me. So I have been in the recruitment space for about 13 years. I do a lot of interview prep testing. I do like that it's a smaller group today. I would love a bit of interaction. And if you have any questions or if I'm going through too fast on anything, definitely let me know. But you know, this is something that I live and breathe. And when I'm doing interview prep sessions with people, I always say to them, I'm in recruitment for 13 years. If I go and do an interview, I spend at least 6 or 7 hours interview prepping. And I train people on how to do this. And that is what I would do if I was going to an interview tomorrow. I would spend 6 or 7 hours interview prepping, and I'd do a full interview with my husband and be like, ask the questions. We're a friend, we're a family member. So it is about knowing how you're going to say it back and all the preparation keys. So to start, we're going to talk about how to prepare for the interview. We're going to talk about questions that are commonly asked. We're going to talk about the STAR method and how to answer those questions and how to follow up after the interview, and then the kind of key takeaways. So I know this is an interview session, but I would always say to people, the main part of your interview is your CV. The amount of people that go to interviews and aren't aware of their experience and how to sell it or how to strongly represent it. So your CV is a strong ambassador for you. If you've got called for an interview, they already like what they see on paper. They already want your experience. They think you're qualified enough to do this role. The interview is more about testing the skills you have in your CV, or it's about talking through the experience. But if they see a gap in your CV, they know it's there. So there's no issue to be going through your CV in detailed experience and going through it from start to finish, but it's all about how you prepare, how you answer, how you account for what you're talking about. So your CV visually demonstrates your key skill set. You know, it should be clear, it should be concise, but it also should be true to who you are. So we still see people that make up fake jobs in their CV. You don't need to do it. Employment, you know, everyone's looking for good candidates. We do not reject people out unless they really don't have the skills, and we require skills. If they don't, it's all about how clear your CV is and how strong we get a function for your application. So your personal statement on your CV, it is your CV elevator pitch. So at the top, you always have a personal statement underneath your contact details. That's something someone else would have told you, but it's a focal point. So we still read personal statements and say, I'm passionate about banking industry. I want to apply for AIB, or I want to apply for Citigroup. I'm like, well, you shouldn't have applied in here. We automatically reject them candidates. Making sure you tailor it, make sure you understand what's everything on it. And if there's a gap, so I know Lisa, you mentioned in your email to me to focus on this gap in CVs. we did a returning talent session. We do returning talent programs in Bank of America. They do them in Vodafone. Most big companies want to get people back into the workforce. There is not enough people with the required skills in the workforce that haven't been for years. So we've called you for an interview, understanding that there's a gap in your experience. So you have a year's gap or a 2 year gap, put in what you were doing. There is no shame to say, I was working at home, or, I was at home raising my kids for the last 4 years, I'm ready to re-enter the workforce. Or I was looking for a job, but actually this is what I did during this time. Embrace the gap, talk it through, do not ignore it. If you don't mention the gap, or if you try and hide the gap with, changing end dates and stuff, it'll always come through in a screening check if they're doing it. But also, it's not a negative thing to have a gap in your CV. So that would be the one thing I'd put. If you've got any questions on your gap, know the answer, know how you're going to talk about it. If it's too long explaining it, this is brought up in the interview. So networking.
Sorry to interrupt.
Lisa, go on.
Yeah, your voice is cracking up a bit. I don't know if it's the internet connection or a microphone.
Okay, I'm going to move. I just made the computer a little bit closer. Is that any better?
I'm not sure. Roba, I think you mentioned that on the chat. Is it better for you? You can use the chat if you prefer.
Okay.
Yeah, she said it's okay, yeah. Thanks.
It's okay. Please let me know and I can change it to a dial-in if it is not coming through clearly. So networking. The recruiting game has changed. So I always put the slide in. I'm looking going, I've had this slide in for 5 years, but it is constantly changing. But what never changes is how you approach your search and always having to network. So years ago, it would generally have been, who do you know? Either friend or friend wants a job or a family member, and that's how you generally got jobs back in the day. But you need to now go out, be visible on LinkedIn, approaching people on LinkedIn, be visible in certain networks, and making sure if you want to go into tech that you're attending the tech events, if you want to go into finance, that you have the right qualifications and that you're networking within the ACCA group. Just make sure you have an elevator pitch. So when you're meeting someone at any of the events that I'm talking about, or in your own area, any event, what is your elevator pitch? You have 30 seconds to a minute to impress someone. So if I walk into a room and I'm introducing myself, and I would generally say, I'm Ashley, I've worked in Bank of America as a recruitment lead, and I have 13 years experience in recruitment. That will either custom or not custom. I'm looking for X. Or, I see you work in Citigroup, I've actually been in Bank of America, or I see you work in Facebook. We actually have a lot of the kind of same types of policies. So you're talking through and understanding the network, understanding where you want to go. And how to prepare for an interview. So the first key thing is the way you will prepare is generally the same for all types of interviews, but the interview you will have will be very different, whether it's a telephone, a face-to-face interview, an assessment center, or a Zoom WebEx. So I'm going to walk through them more quickly. A telephone interview is generally a 30-minute discussion. Generally, telephone interviews won't last much longer. And that's generally the first screening stage of someone's interview. So they will talk through your experience. They'd like to check that your communication skills are good. And that is by being able to account for yourself and talking through your experience. Even on a telephone interview, I always say to people, I smile. So I'm on the telephone and, I'm going through a rebuild at the moment and I'm constantly ringing the bank and I'm smiling, talking to her. So I sound like such a happy and pleasant person. But if you smile, you do actually sound happier and pleasant, and really pleasant on the phone. So that is what I say. If you're going to go through an interview, when you're on the telephone, they can't see your reactions to certain questions they ask. They can't see your reactions if you're smiling. If they ask something and you're smiling, they won't see it, but they can hear from the tone in your voice. And remembering to smile, remembering to sound pleasant, and engage and interested. So if you're on a telephone interview, pose yourself into a room, focus just on that interview, and make sure that you've kind of got time and space to do it and really dedicate yourself. For a face-to-face interview, this is my favorite type of interview. We have gone back to face-to-face interviews for all candidates. You gather so much more. As an interviewer, you can see if someone is nervous. If it takes a few minutes, if you need to warm them up and get them out of their cell, you can see the anxiety, but you can't see on a telephone. So when we're doing a telephone interview, some people may come across as rude or abrupt, but they're not. They're just quite nervous, and we can't see that they're anxious about the interview. So we've gone back to the face-to-face model. A face-to-face interview would always be my preference. But for a candidate, most candidates get nervous in a face-to-face environment. Taking that 5 minutes, arriving early, arriving 5 to 10 minutes early, sitting in a reception will calm your nerves because you're just solely focused on being there. When you meet the interviewer, again, smile. You don't know what type of day they've had, or they don't know what type of day you've had. So if they come across quite sharp, or if they're kind of smiling but rouging you here and there, it could be just that they've had a busy day. So I would always say to people, when you meet someone for a face-to-face interview, it's a great way for us to assess candidates, but it's also great for candidates to assess our managers. And would you like to work with them again? And for example, if you didn't like that interviewer, doesn't go and take that job. If you didn't like the person you're working with, you're never going to like working with them. So if you didn't like them when you were interviewing, you're not going to like working with them. So it's a good understanding, but remember, it's a balance. You're interviewing them, but they're interviewing you, but you're also interviewing them. An assessment center is quite different. So it's really focusing on your technical abilities. And there will always be moderators in the room in the assessment center. They will always when I run an assessment center where I have one assessment center, they will always watch if certain people manage the situation. If they're put in group settings, who's the leader, who takes a back seat, who's quite quiet. So there's always people assessing you, and just remember that when you're doing an assessment center. And then you could be on Zoom or WebEx. I again prefer this to a telephone. It makes it a lot more easy to communicate with people, and you can see reactions. And kind of WebEx or video interviewing is definitely what I prefer in terms of face-to-face will always be first and then a WebEx. They're the types of interviews, but you'll always prepare in the same way. So you should know when you're going to an interview, who will you be meeting with? Will it be a manager? Is it a stakeholder? Is it a peer or client? So when I interviewed with Bank of America, I interviewed with the manager of the recruitment team. My last final round was the main, the stakeholder client. So it was the head of operations in Dublin. And he would have been my client, the person I'd interact with on a daily basis. The way I interviewed with him was quite different to how I interviewed with my manager. So knowing who you're meeting with, knowing what their role is, know what he's trying to understand, that's what you want to try and do. Always remember to smile and make eye contact. You should always dress smart. Even if you're going into an interview or somewhere with a casual dress code and people are walking around in jeans and hoodies, throwing on a blazer and a pair of jeans will dress you up. And a nice top or a shirt or whatever it may be. But always dress smart going into an interview. You're there to make an impression, and you want to make a positive impression with people, show that you've made an effort. And that does come through with your clothing. Engage with all interviewers. So if you're sitting in a room and there's 4 people in front of you, taking the time to try and move around or interact. If there's a 2-person interview, interacting with different people. I know it's easier to say, but it's constantly thinking while you're in an interview, I need to make sure I'm spreading my eye contact with both. And ask great questions. And the biggest question I always ask is, I always get when I say ask great questions, no one knows what questions to ask. It is the one thing that people struggle with interviews. The questions I will always ask is, tell me why you enjoy working for X company. Or I'd love to learn a bit more about your career. Everyone likes to talk themselves through. You can see where they started and how they've got them, see if you can link through in that way. So even though you're asking the questions, you're trying to find a common ground or a middle ground. Tell me, what you think is the biggest challenge about working here. Or tell me what you think would be the biggest challenge for me if I took on this role. And so you're asking, you're not talking about salary in the interview, you're not talking about negative things or asking questions about parking or benefits. You are asking something about the role or something about the company. So research. As I started this call, I said to you, I'm doing an interview 7 to 8 hours I will prep on. You should research the company, know who you're going to interview with, know something more than just the company website. You should always read a company website. Most company websites have news and links to it where they show the top kind of news articles or what they want out of the French moment. You can read any related news articles. I would generally Google search the company name and click on the news tab. Anything that they've done in the last years will come up. Know who the board members are. Know who the managers are on the team. Know what the team does. So if you get called, and we've seen it a number of times here, and they get called to come for an interview for the settlement team, they don't know who the settlements are. Google it. Learn what you're interviewing for. If you don't know the role, you try and read into the job description, but then also, if you don't know what the role is in detail, look into it, see if you enjoy it. Know your interviewers, so look at them through LinkedIn or Google, search their name. Again, they might have attended an event and did a presentation a few years ago that you can kind of look back on, or actually reading an article you wrote or you were interviewed on, or whatever it may be. And as I said, understanding the steps. What is the role actually doing? Read the job description. If you don't understand what the job is, go and research the job. Have questions on that and say, I have no experience in settlement. But when I was reading online, I understood that this was the role. Is that correct in my thinking? Or you give me a bit of information. That is a lovely question. Know what the department does. So what are they part of? If it's a tech role, and you're calling it an information security team, what do they actually do? What does the team really do? Trying to understand it. And again, what if and what questions do you ask a role? And I think the key point when I said so your interview. So the key thing for interview prep is knowing your CV. So if you look at my computer at home, Elise, have you got a question?
Yeah, no, sorry. I think the connection was bad again. I don't know if it's the same for everyone, but I couldn't hear what you said there for the past maybe 30, 40 seconds.
Is anyone else having this issue? Would it be better if I called in?
What does everyone think? Can you hear Ashley okay, or is it just me?
He was definitely breaking for like a couple seconds here as well for me, 2 times now.
Oh, I'm sorry. Alicia, is there a dial-in that I can call in and see if it's better?
Let me check.
Phone audio. I'm gonna try and switch to the phone audio.
Just check here. Yeah, I'm gonna send it to you via email actually. Okay. And there's a link to find your local number because most of them are for the US.
I think I have it here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Password followed by #. Now, there are 10 participants in the meeting. This meeting is being recorded. You are muted. You are person added to the waiting group. You are muted. You can mute or unmute yourself by pressing star. You are unmuted.
Lisa, can you hear me now?
Yeah, but there's feedback.
I can hear it up. Oh, God.
Maybe if I mute myself, then there won't be the feedback, right? Is there? Can we try it again?
Do you want me to try the dial-in or do you want me to continue it? Perfect.
Great.
Okay, so I think we were talking through Know Your CV. So as I said, I do a lot of prep when I'm doing it. I will have prepared in advance of any interview the skills and competencies. I will match them to what the job description says, but I will have the same 5 examples. I've had them for years. I might update with 1 or 2 to add new jobs on, but I will always prepare 5 examples ready for the competency-based questions. So the biggest part is knowing your CV and knowing how you're going to talk through it. So at the start of every interview, they're going to ask a leading question. They will say, you know, tell me a bit about yourself. Why are you here today? Why are you interested in this job? You know, can you tell me why you think you'd be good for this job, or why your skills match this job, or why you'd be strong for it? So there'll always be that leading question. There's kind of 2 questions in there. So they're either asking you, they will always ask, what do you know about the company, or why do you want to work here? Why do you want the job? So in advance of the interview, you practice, you know your answer. So why do you want to work there for the company? Or if they ask you, why do you want this job? Well, actually, I've been researching Bank of America and I find it really interesting. It has the same goals or the same, ethics that I would have. And I really like to focus on risk management that we do in Bank of America. It's a real strong topic. And, I really like to focus on risk. I'd be quite risk averse myself. And, what I know about the role is X. Or if they ask you, why do you want to work here? You can talk about the company and then lead into the role. So you should always prepare 30 seconds to a minute on the company answer, and then a minute to 2 about why you want that specific role, or why do you think you'd be strong at it. On your 5 examples, so I had said, you're going to prepare about the company, and then the next thing they'll either ask you about the company first, or they'll ask you about yourself first. Tell me a bit about yourself. When I started this introduction, I said, I've got, 8 years 13 years of recruitment experience, 7, 8 years as a recruiter initially. So I recruited, and I'd go into more detail, but it would be still the same 2-minute snapshot. So 13 years of experience in recruitment. When I started in recruitment, I started in agency recruitment for 4.5 years with PPL. I recruited HR professionals, and then I moved to the accounting and finance side. And from that, I actually moved into Citibank as a recruiter for a year. And then I went to Bank of America, where I started as a recruiter for Dublin, managing all operations, technology recruiter. And then I moved on. But if you can see what I'm doing, I'm showing the keywords. So in a job spec for a recruiter or a recruitment manager, they want to know what areas you've covered before, how big, how many roles you'll recruit. So I'm giving that snapshot of 2 minutes, summarizing my experience. And then they can delve in and ask further questions. They can say, oh, well, when you joined Bank of America, you said you recruited technology. What did you do? And that will delve into a further question. But it's knowing your experience and being able to summarize it in the way you want it to come across. The 5 examples, so this is for the competency-based side. So if you break down, most interviews are 45 minutes. You train hiring managers on interviews, they're the same thing. So you'll either get a 45-minute or an hour interview slot. And that's to allow for it to go over. Most managers will try and do an interview within 30 to 45 minutes. The first 5 minutes are for introduction. The last 5 minutes should be for the company to sell it. And that means for 40 minutes in the interim, they're leaving 5 to 10 minutes to go over your experience or talk through your CV, and 20 to 30 minutes for competency-based questions or asked questions they really want to answer. That's where I'd like you to focus most of your time. So you have a summarized 2-minute summary of your experience or what you've done or where you've come from. And, I've been living in Ireland for the last 2 years, or I've been living in Ireland for 10 years. Or, my career started in Romania and I did X, Y, and Z for 5 years, and then I did this. So talking through it, it's all in your CV, and talking through, summarizing your experience and giving them an overview. The 5 examples I keep pulling out, so this is for your competency-based questions. So if you read any job description, there will always be skills at the end of it, and they are what competency-based questions are going to be asked on. So it's not a hidden secret. If any job you're applying to, they'll say, we want someone who has strong teamwork skills or strong communication skills. They will list the skills and the skills essential for the role, or what you need to have at the end. They're always going to list these skills. They're going to be tested in the interview. So you can prepare yourself to know what questions they're going to ask based on reading the job description. But if you prepare 5 examples, no matter what interview you go into, I use the same for every interview I go into. So I generally tell people, prepare 5 examples in the STAR method, which we're going to talk through after. I talk about your 3 biggest achievements in work. So over your career, if you've had no work experience and you've only had college experience, what are your 3 biggest achievements? What projects did you work on? What were the best accomplishments you've ever had that you felt really great? And it could be the smallest project, but it meant a lot to you at the time, or it's a really complicated thing that you did. We're going to base 5 examples. So you're going to get 3 positive and 2 negative. The worst thing you can ever remember happening at work. The worst outcome, something that you did wrong or someone else did wrong and a problem you had to fix. Same with if you only had college experience, or if you didn't have working experience and you had any kind of examples to pull from working projects in college, you think it's the worst 2 things that happened. Why I prepare 5 examples showing my 3 best and my 2 worst, that shows resilience. It shows how I overcame a problem. It shows how I deal with under pressure or in a challenging environment. That's something they're not asking you to show, but they may ask, can you give me an example of a time that you were, overcoming a difficult situation or you were dealing with a difficult hiring manager. Those 2 worst ones shows how you overcame it and what you did to change or what you learned from it. And, I've sat in interviews, and one of my examples that I use, I sit there and go, actually, it was the worst thing. It was probably, I should have managed it better. And this is what I do now going forward. So talking through it, be specific. Talk about a scope and scale of a project or the scope and scale of the issue. You telling someone, you should be trying to say it to your friend who knows nothing about the industry, nothing about what happens. And if you were explaining it to a friend, that's how you should explain it in an interview. Be specific. So talk about who did you manage, what did you do on it. The communications are really clear. If it was complex or not, it could have been the most simple thing, but actually it's a really good thing that you saved effort for doing it. And, what you have to negotiate or what you have to do differently to change. So, again, in an interview, you still need to have your elevator pitch. So, most people will go up in a lift in an interview and will stand in a lift and quiet. How do you fill that gap? So, you can kind of talk about the weather, you can talk about going into the interview, or you can kind of try and talk about sports, or did you see Ireland won at the weekend, or, are you following the rugby? Or you can just talk about and have that 2-minute elevator pitch that is not an awkward silence. You want to know whether you'll be a good fit for the role, and you want to show your true self in an interview, because if you don't, they're going to hire you and think you are a totally different person. So I've had awful managers during my time. I've had 2 in 13 years. I haven't done too bad. But if I had interviewed with them, I would have never went to work with them because their style is completely different to mine. And I've had great managers, and it's knowing the difference, knowing what you want to work with or what environment you want to work with. So certain companies I wouldn't work for, not because I don't think it's a great company, but I actually know a lot of the people in them teams that came from teams that I worked with, and they're the people I wouldn't have a lot in common with. I wouldn't share the same work drive, or I wouldn't share the same experiences or what we want to do. And I know I might be able to add value, but I would enjoy working in that environment. So you're testing them just as much as they're testing you. So you need to understand what they're like in the interview and trying to understand them as well. The importance of building a good rapport. It's really hard. If someone likes you in the interview and they think you'll be a great teammate or you fit in well with the team, they're trying to find reasons not to hire you based on your skills. But if they think that you're actually going to be a great team fit and that, you seem like a hard worker or someone who will try and work hard, like it doesn't matter if you constantly try, they'll want to take you on because they're like, actually, we just need someone who's passionate to learn. And most managers come to us in recruitment and they say, I just want someone who's going to put the head down, who's eager to learn, to change, and really focuses on trying to get the work done and take joint responsibility. So it's the hiring manager and the intercompany's responsibility to make sure an interview is comfortable, but it's also your responsibility to ask questions and make it an engaging conversation. If you're sitting there and you're not asking questions back when they ask you a question at the end, or can you give me a bit more information about that? If you're not engaged in it and you're only answering the question, it's really hard to build that rapport. So trying to build a rapport in the interview. So I had said we were going to touch on the STAR method and competency-based questions, but again, this is where I focus on. So if you think and you hear those 5 examples, consider your examples of your abilities ahead of time. You identify key competencies to relate to the job and relate the competencies back to your abilities. And you practice your answer with the STAR response technique. So type of competencies, if you Google competency-based interviews or what is a competency, this is the list that comes up. So in a competency-based interview, they're really testing if you're flexible, if you've got good communication skills, if you've got good business awareness or business acumen. Are you resilient? Have you got strong teamwork? Are you a leader if you're going for a leadership role? How do you demonstrate your leadership? If you're going for a manager role, decision making, how do you problem solve? How do you adapt to different situations? Are you a collaborator or how do you work in teams? Again, critical thinking. So it's always going to be the same competencies. Competencies don't change. There's only a certain amount to list them. So every answer you're going to do, you're going to look at a list of questions and try and do it. So as I said, you're going to prepare your questions. So type of competence-based questions. But if we go through this list, you will see the different types of questions that will lead to the list on the left that I'm talking through. So demonstrate how you vary your communication approach to the audience that you're addressing. That's the communication type we were talking about. Tell me about a time when you had to explain something you knew well to someone who had difficulty understanding it. That's about collaboration, problem solving. Tell me about a specific time when you experienced conflict with another team, member, and how you handled it. What did you learn from the experience? That's all about teamwork. And I think if we look at that, what did you learn from the experience? That is my favourite thing, because most people forget to give the results. When you're doing a situation, task, action, result, you always forget to mention the results. So if we look at the STAR method, so to start, when you're preparing an example, you talk to this situation that you were in or the task that you needed to accomplish. So you must describe some specific events. You can't just say, I'm really strong at teamwork, because one day, what was the situation? Where were you at? Be sure to give enough details for the interviewer to understand what you're talking about and how it's relevant. This situation can be from a previous job, a volunteer experience, project in college, in school, whatever it may be. Describe what your responsibility was in the situation. So you can say, oh, I had a great project I worked in Bank of America, and it was the Brexit project. But you're not saying what you did. So what are you responsible for? What was your role in it? What actions did you take? So what did you do to resolve the issue if it was an issue? Or what actions did you do that made it that you were part, or what were you contributing for? Most people say, when they're describing a teamwork or a project, or if they were working in a group setting in their example, they keep using the word we instead of I. So remembering to lead it back to what you took responsibility for, or what your responsibility was in it. And the results. Describe the outcome of your action. So I had prepared the lead I'd asked to prepare some examples. So I had prepared some of my examples for my interview, that what I kind of took up. So one of the questions I get asked in my role is, can you give me an example of a time where you've worked with a difficult hiring manager, or how do you change that relationship? And I always go back to the same example. Geez, this was the worst hiring manager. He still is. I don't even work with him anymore. Worst hiring manager in Bank of America. He was the most difficult person to work with in terms of communication. He's really inefficient. And if you're sitting in my seat, you need a bit of a lax. We're dealing with people. It's not a number. It's not a product. You can't just deliver when he asks to deliver all the time. So I was working with this manager in a large project to recruit 13 people into the team. And if you can see what I've done there, I told about what I was doing, what the situation was, but actually what the volume was. And we needed to recruit them over he wanted them to start within 8 weeks, which means we had no time for recruitment. So we talked through the time frame of how long it takes. It takes us 6 weeks to onboard. So unless we had candidates interviewed and offered today, they wouldn't have met 8 weeks. So giving realistic timescales, we talked through, we set a plan in place in terms of when, we put a project together, if you want 13 people, what will we commit to? So when we sat down, I said, listen, it's going to take 8 weeks for us to recruit 13 people. And these 8 weeks, we will meet the targets if we spend next week sourcing and screening. We will do all the sourcing. We will have over 20 CVs with you next Friday. And once I get those CVs to you, I need your time the next week to do the interview. So if you can come back to me on Monday morning and let me know, and even on Friday night, if you can review on Friday afternoon and give me the candidates that you want to interview, I can start setting them up for you next week. What is your availability? So I planned it out for next week in detail when his availability was, so I could match it and make sure we met the deadline. And you know, I had put a whole plan together, and it was quite funny because it relied on him giving me the information at a certain date. So as I knew he was a difficult manager, I put my expectations of him and his expectations of me to be able to deliver to this time frame. And of course, we didn't deliver. You know, we had CVs on Friday, and he actually didn't come back to the Wednesday to give us feedback. So then the interviews were going to happen a week later, and you know, second, third round candidates pulling out. It wasn't the goal I set it, but I had put a clear guideline that you took too long to come back. You didn't have enough availability to do all these interviews, hence what it took 2 weeks to do an interview, all the interviews. You know, you weren't dealing with the situation. So I did put a large project in. I set up a tracker, which I actually use always now. We did get the 13 hires. It didn't happen within the 8-week time frame, but as I'd advised them, we needed 6 weeks for recruitment and 6 to 8 weeks for onboarding. We had 11 of those hires within that period, and we had 2 hires that started 2 weeks later. And the delays were on both sides, but I had a weekly call with them to engage and manage to ensure that we met the deadlines. It was a clear communication style because I knew what I needed to hit for him, and it was quite fast-paced and high-volume recruitment. So I'm again talking through what the situation was, what the task, the action, but I'm making sure I get the results as to what I did. You know, for me, I probably overpromised. Getting 13 hires in 6 weeks. You know, 13 candidates to hire was always going to be a challenge. And I probably didn't give myself enough time. So actually, you know, I don't think I'd commit to a time frame because it's so reliant on someone else giving it to you. I think I'd talk through what their responsibility is and then coming back and, you know, maybe giving myself an extra week or two so we don't need to miss the deadline. But when you're giving examples, you need to talk through the situation, the task, the action, and result. It should take you 3 to 4 minutes to talk through a competence-based answer. Write your answer down as you're going to pull it out in an interview, and as if you were getting the real question. For an interview, don't forget the logistics. You can't be late to an interview. You need to know where you're going, where you're going to park when you get there, if you've drove, or you know, if a dark late, leave enough time, or a Lewis, make sure you leave enough time. Who do you need to ask for on arrival? You know, did you read the email? Did you make sure you have all the information? Not just turning up at reception saying, I'm here for an interview. Do you need to bring an ID? So in Bank of America, everyone coming in for an interview has to have an ID with them to verify who they are. That will say it on the email that we send you. But a few candidates don't read the email, they forget. So read the email, make sure you know what you have to have coming through. Understand and have a copy of the job description and a copy of your CV. So you might have applied into this company 4 years before and they've printed off the wrong CV. They've sent them the CV 4 years ago and actually it's changed. You having it is great when you make a book. But just having them both, just in case there's technical issues on the business side is always great, so you're not getting rescheduled. Don't forget to turn off your phone. So when I started doing this session, I didn't put my phone on silent and let it vibrate. I turned off the vibrate. I turned off my instant messenger. I didn't want anyone to distract me when I was doing the session. That's what you should be doing, turning off all distractions. Turning your phone upside down on the table so you can't see if you're getting messages. And you're looking at it and do you really want to see what it says. So just make sure that you turn it all off, make sure it's on silent and unvibrated. But how do you stand out? So follow up after an interview. Always follow up with after an interview with an email within 24 hours. Don't just thank them for the time. Make sure you're asking questions, make it engaging, and don't chase. So when you expect feedback? That's a good question to ask a manager if you want to know in the interview, or you're eager, or if you have another offer on the table, or you're interviewing in a number of places. Ask them, when should I expect to hear back from you? Generally, the rule of thumb is within 5 days. No news is not bad news. I will reject someone out straight away. So if you're not suitable, they'll generally reject you straight away. They're not going to leave you hanging around for no reason. If you haven't heard back, it's already a positive. So they're either testing you against another person coming in for an interview. You're not a no, you're a maybe at this point. Or you're a yes, but actually we have another interview going on. And we have to give them a fair process because they're coming in after, but they were both set up at the same time. So no news is not bad news. If you don't hear after 5 days, message the hiring manager if you're, the manager if you were dealing with them directly, or message the recruiter or HR partner. Hi, I interviewed Friday of last week. I haven't heard anything back. Just wanted to check when I should expect feedback, or if you've made a decision yet. They'll generally write back with a pleasant message and say, no, no decision's been made, or I'm still waiting, or the manager was off for the last few days, or I'm expecting me to take off, having no feedback, and they'll give you an answer. But there's always a reason. If you don't hear from feedback from an interview within 10 days, or from anyone in the company, I say do not harass the hiring manager, but that's when I start to send kind of chasers, communications. Not overly so you don't want to send 4 or 5 emails a week. You do want to get an answer, and you deserve feedback after taking your time to do the interview too. So, key takeaways for me for this session that I want you to remember is embrace the gap. Have your elevator pitch ready, and don't be shy to use it. Preparation is key, and don't stop networking. So even after the interview doesn't go well, and they say, we've got someone that's stronger. I've rejected numerous people out of roles within the bank over the years that we've hired 3 or 4 months later when a different role came up, or 6 months. The way you accept the feedback, where I've rejected people out because they haven't been strong enough for that one role, or we've had a stronger candidate. But we've had another role come up, and we said, what about, Talisa from the, we interviewed at Christmas, and she was really pleasant. And when we rejected her, she was quite positive. So we reconnect with her and see if she'd be interested in this role. I think it was more serious skill set. So remember to take it as a positive. It's not always a wasted. I'm cautious of time for questions. So, Talisa, have we had any questions come through, or do you have any questions for me?
There are no questions on the chat. Does anyone have any questions? You can use the chat, or you can just raise your hand or unmute yourself. I think nothing at the moment.
And I know, Talisa, you had suggested at the start to maybe stop the recording, so people might feel free to kind of come if they have any questions on their own experience or anything that they're struggling with in the interviews. I think it's quite a small group, so I don't know if people